Welcome, everybody. We are here. We are back in the crypt for another amazing interview. Looking forward to this interview for actually a few months now with this amazing gentleman. And I am really looking forward to this. I first found his work on the One Great Work Network, and then also started to watch his videos and stuff that he's doing on YouTube. And so my guest who I'm going to be getting on this evening is Mark Devlin, who is a radio and club DJ. He's an author, he's a music journalist, and now he's doing a lot of amazing content. He just did a great presentation for the Shattering the Illusion conference, which was amazing. I just watched it again, and it was great. It was called the presentation was Weaponization of Psychology, and I hope that you guys will check that out at the Shattering the Illusion. Like I said, for their conference, you can also find it at Mark Devlin's website, YouTube channel, on the One Great Work. So I will leave links for that, guys, all over, so you guys can find his work. I just want to go ahead. I don't have a lot of time with him. This interview was in the making and almost didn't happen, guys, because of time zones, as we love time zones. So I'm glad that he took the time to come and chat with us. So I'm just going to go ahead and welcome him. Welcome, Mark, to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me today.
Yeah, what's going on, Rick? Thanks for the kind words, and happy to be here on the show.
Awesome. And let's dive right into it, because I only got an hour with you and I want to make the most of it. So I was just letting people know about the Shatter the Illusion conference and your presentation. So why don't we start there and let people know what went into this presentation, why you wanted to do this topic, and what went into it, and why you think it's an important topic for people to hear.
Well, I got invited to contribute a presentation to the conference by the organisers, James Cordner and Joe Murray. And I could have gone in on the music industry, which is what I'm known for talking about, exposing the machinations and the true nature of it. But I thought it would be interesting to instead focus on something that's much more topical, something that's much more timely, that is going to have affected everyone watching that presentation and everyone that will view the video subsequently. And that is the weaponization of psychology, which is the title that I gave to the talk. And it examines the military grade tactics that have been used these past 2.5, 3 years specifically, but in reality, going back a long way before that. It's behavioral science and psychology combined with social engineering, which has been applied to pretty much everyone in organized society. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the evidence of it most obviously during the COVID situation. But I thought it'd be good to examine some of the methods and the tactics that have been used by these traitors that are trying to change society and affect the thoughts and perceptions and consciousness of pretty much everyone in the world. So I went into many of the ways that they've achieved this, looking at the history of behavioral science and studying things like hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, these kind of tactics, but also some lesser known ones like the Alice in Wonderland technique, which is a variation on the good cop, bad cop style of interrogation that you see police and military using. I mean, all this stuff that's been used against us is supposed to be used in war situations of conflict with an enemy, whereas these things have been turned on the people, the general population, which lets us know the true nature of those who are currently controlling organized society. So they've used all these techniques, gaslighting and deliberately sowing confusion marketing, as it's known in the advertising industry, which is a technique specifically concerned with flooding the target's mind with so much conflicting information, self-contradictory, that they just don't know if they're coming or going, and it turns their brains to mush. And in the advertising industry, that's used to get across their subliminal advertising messages. But in the situation that we've all been through, it's been used to reinforce the propaganda and all the fear-based mind control that's been propagated against all of us. So that's what the presentation was. And I gave a lot of examples. Mm-hmm. I've featured various people talking about these techniques. I've got a couple of clips of Darren Brown, who's a guy that I find endlessly fascinating. He's an illusionist and he's been a TV host and an
That was
author,
amazing. That clip that you showed. I know the one you mean. We're
right?
at the
Well,
racetrack, correct?
yeah, well, I had two clips. So one is where he's at a dog racing track and he's got this guy with him, and they're trying to con the teller at the cashier into paying out winnings on a dog that didn't win the race. So the other guy tries it, and the woman in the box says, "Oh, sorry, this dog didn't
Mm-hmm.
win." And then Darren Brown steps up and he slaps the side of the box, and she sort of smarts from it because he's given her a shock. And that's how he gets the programming done. So he then steps into hypnosis mode and he says, "This is the dog that you're looking for." And he's actually paraphrasing a line of dialogue from the original Star Wars
Right.
movie, where Alec Guinness's character says, "These aren't the droids that you're looking for," to a guard. And he puts the guard in a sort of mind control trance. So Darren Brown is doing the same thing, and he succeeds in getting this cashier to pay out on a dog that didn't win the race. And at the end of it, he says, "Can you just double check, what you've just done there?" And she looked at the ticket and realized that it wasn't the winning dog, but she couldn't work out what had happened because she's got no recollection of it. Reason being, she's been hypnotized. She's been placed under mind control because this guy knows what he's doing. And the point is, there are behavioral scientists that are using these same techniques against us. And the only way that they've got so many of us to behave in ways that have been counterproductive and which have actually been doing self-harm to us and our loved ones is by employing these techniques. They would never have got it done otherwise. So the military installations of the world and military intelligence operations such as MI5, MI6, the Tavistock Institute here in the UK, over in the States, it would be the CIA and, Stanford Research Institute and Yale and Harvard universities that perfect these kind of operations. And in Canada, it will be, whatever the equivalent is. These things have been weaponized against the people. And it shouldn't be that way because these intel operations are supposed to be there to keep the people safe from threats to their well-being, safe from harm. And the truth of the matter is these very organizations that are charged with those responsibilities have actually been causing the harm because they know how to manipulate the human psyche and how to do that on a mass societal scale. And that's what they've been doing. So that's what I wanted to highlight in the presentation. And as I say, I gave many examples of these dynamics in action, and it clocked in the full version clocked in at 1 hour 43 minutes. And I've now released that on all my video channels. It was slightly abridged for the Shattering the Illusion conference, but the full version is out there for anyone to watch.
Amazing. Yeah, and I hope that everyone does. I'll make sure, Mark, that I leave links in the description so people can check it out because what you're talking about, that presentation was startling to me when I watched it, and I had to watch it twice because I was like, really? When you see that the dog, like you bring up the one example of the two videos of at the dog races, and you see how quickly he puts her in that mind control state, and he just slams. You see it, and you don't even see it if you don't know what you're looking for. At first, I didn't catch it. I was like, how did he do that? And then you bring out how he slams the wall and he puts her in that fear state, and you see her just freeze and stare at him. It's startling, guys, when you see
Well,
this.
another thing is the language that he uses, which is always important. I don't know if you noticed, but when he stepped up there, he said, "That's why we came to this window." So he's used the word win and he's planted it in her subconscious mind. So now she's in that mode where she's thinking about winning and paying out on the winning ticket. So use of language is very important as well.
Wow, yes, and then it's funny when they kind of bring it up to her, she can't, like you said, she can't even explain what happened because they're like, "Why did you pay out on the winning ticket?" And she was really shocked that she even did it. So I'm thinking the social engineers, I call them the dark occultists because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with dark psychologists, as you said, who know the human psyche way better than most people ever will. And they're using this against us. So I'm looking at the social media situation, and they must be having a free for all with the social media system the way they can control people so easily now. Everybody's kind of plugged into the internet and social media. They can steer us wherever they want to bring us.
Yeah. Well, it's probably worth mentioning the other Darren Brown clip that I included in that talk as well, which is another excerpt from this Channel 4 show that he used to have several years ago on mainstream TV here. So he's got a couple of advertising executives in a meeting room, and he's asking them to come up with a product or a business and to come up with some methods of marketing that business effectively. And this is what they do. It's their regular work, And he asks them to have a think about it. And he comes back and asks them what they've come up with. And they say they want to start a business called Pet Heaven, or Animal Heaven, I think it was. And it's where pets go, after they've passed over. And so they've come up with this idea of some pearly gates and a bear playing a harp, and all these other sort of animal themed ideas. And they think they've just come up with this stuff on the spot. They've thought it up. They've been creative and just, come up with all this stuff. But at the end of the show, he demonstrates how he planted all these ideas in their subconscious mind on the taxi journey that they took to go and do the filming. So you then see all the points along the taxi journey. They passed a zoo. They passed a shop with a harp in the window. They passed a shop with a toy bear in the window. There's some kids with a slogan on their T-shirts as they were crossing the street. And he's put all these ideas into the subconscious mind of these two guys. And they work in the advertising industry. So they're going to be using these techniques themselves all the time. But they had no idea that this idea of the Animal Heaven project was put into their mind by Darren Brown. So that's another example of how this gets done. And if you asked people, the average person in the street, are you under societal mind control? Are your thoughts your own? They would say, well, yeah, of course my thoughts are my own. I'm not susceptible to mind control, because we don't realize it's happening. But when you get the methods pointed out to you, and when you can study how it was achieved, you'll never be fooled in the same way again. So that's why I think it's so important to put out information of this nature and demonstrate these methods and techniques so that you can break that mind control spell and stop them from having the same effect the next time they're tried on you.
Wow, so true. And I that clip about the advertising was fascinating. I saw that clip a while before your presentation somewhere. I saw that whole clip of that show, and I was fascinated when you see that how they were programmed and not even realized it. So I hope people realize that, as you just brought up, any signs that you're looking at or anything that you're seeing out in the world it's subconsciously going in. You're taking it in, whether you realize it or not. And that, to me, that's scary, Mark. I mean, it really is. I mean, and I'm aware of it now. And like you said, once you're aware of it, you start to really see it everywhere. And especially I see it on social media really bad. But definitely in the world too. And I think people have to realize that everything that you're seeing out there is they're steering you they're steering you and mind controlling you to the signs that you're seeing, the colors they're using, everything. I think people think that this is all random, but it's, when you boil it down, it's not. To the colors they're choosing, the fonts they're choosing, the songs they're using, it's all part of a program.
Yeah. Well, this ties into trauma-based mind control, actually. MK Ultra, that far-reaching program coming out of the CIA, those nice folk at Langley, they've been doing this for decades. I mean, that operation was officially retired in the 1970s, so we're told. I don't accept. I don't accept that was wound up ever. It was ramped up, if anything, and it's still going on. And what you find when you get into studying that whole area, such as monarch programming, beta sex kitten programming, and all these different derivatives that they use, particularly in entertainment and very much in the music industry, is that you have, first of all, handlers assigned to these mind control subjects, which in many cases are artists, favorite musicians, favorite Hollywood actors, TV presenters and such. But you also have triggers. And like you just said there, a trigger which sets off the mind control programming when it's been done correctly can include colors, patterns, logos, a piece of music, a trigger phrase, certain words. This is what has been used to program Manchurian candidate style assassins, which is one aspect of MK Ultra. Think of the likes of Mark Chapman, who's said to have shot John Lennon, John Hinckley, who shot Ronald Reagan, Sirhan Sirhan, who's said to have shot Robert Kennedy Jr. Sorry, not Jr., Senior. And in all cases, they were triggered into their mind-controlled state by a pattern or a phrase or, something they'd seen. So if those triggers can be used to program assassins and celebrities to perform the way the controllers want them to perform and stay on script and push agendas, then it follows that it can also happen on a societal, collective, worldwide basis. So we're getting triggers used against us. We're getting programmed in the same way. It all happens below the radar on an unseen level, always targeting the subconscious mind. And again, the key to breaking the spell and ensuring this stuff doesn't work is getting streetwise to the methods and, studying this information, which is why it's so important to get this stuff out there. Because like I say, if you asked the average person, they would heavily deny that they could be mind controlled in such an easy way. But we see it all the time. And this is a good segue into the music industry, actually. Because
absolutely right. But right before we hit the music, though, Mark, I wanted to ask you, just to bring it full circle, because we started off talking about in your presentation with the at the dog races and how he hits the wall and kind of puts her in that fear state. So I always tell people that's why they're pumping this fear constantly in the news and social media. It's always one fear after another. They've always got another fear. I call it bullet in the chamber to keep people in that constant state of fear. And I'm assuming that you're going to let people know that that's why they're always having this. There's always some type of fear, panic going on that they're pumping into the people's homes through the news and social media, as I was saying. And that's very important to make this all work. An aspect of it is to keep people in that fear state because they're more programmable. Am I correct?
That's right. And if there's any good news to be found in all of this, it's the fact that they do need to keep the propaganda and the fear-based mind control stepped up all the time. Right. It's a 24/7, 365 operation for them. Absolutely. Because they realize that if they took the foot off the pedal, it would become obvious, or it may well become obvious, hopefully it would, to large numbers of people what's been going on. So they keep it stepped up through the mainstream media, through the news bulletins that you hear, so-called newspapers, TV and radio, so-called news. They keep it stepped up in popular culture, all these movies that we get, which depict some futuristic scenario. Right. Don't know if you've noticed, but any movie you ever see which depicts a futuristic society always has it as dystopian, some calamity, some disaster has befallen humanity. It's usually merged with technology in some way, artificial intelligence or robots or cyborgs or some electronic digital kind of system that people are tied into. And there's always some tyrannical regime that needs to be fought by the people. So we're getting constant depictions of this, again, dropped into our subliminal minds collectively all the time. They don't want to be putting out movies with utopian futuristic societies where people are living in harmony with nature, in accordance with natural law principles, doing no harm, not accepting outrageous incursions on their natural born rights and freedoms. Right. No, as George Carlin would have said, they're not interested in that at all. So absolutely. The fact that we only ever get one type of movie and one type of narrative in TV shows and such, and even in things like, think of all these comics, these graphic novels. They're always very dark and very dystopian in their themes. You get the same thing with a lot of music now. A lot of the stuff that's going into the sound frequencies and the way these records sound, and often the lyrics as well, is fitting in with those same themes. So it's a multi-pronged attack, and it's coming at us 24/7. And like I say, if there's any optimism to be drawn from this, it's the fact that they know if they didn't keep this stepped up all the time, then it might just shatter the illusion, to use that term, and the veil might fall, and it might be so obvious what's been done to us all this time.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, you're so right. I'm thinking of all the movies that are coming out and have been out, and you're right, the comic books, and that's a great way to, like you said, to segue into the music, because as I was telling you, music has been a big part of my life forever that I can remember. And I'm definitely, I was a DJ for a few years back. And so there's always music going in the background. It's just, something I really enjoy. And then I know that I've watched so many of your work, so much of your work. And I know that music, there is one definite way that they are controlling the masses. And I talk to people about this, my friends and stuff, and they kind of get it maybe in a way, but they don't think it's that nefarious or that it's that well thought out. And then the more you dig into it, Mark, as I've been doing and watching your work and that, and you start to realize that this is really, they are really using music in to steer society. And then when you start looking back, I go back, like I went back as far as like the 70s and in the 60s with Jim Morrison, and then I found out his dad's high in the military, and in the Navy, I think, and I'm like, wow. And then you look into Laurel Canyon, and you start digging in all these bands, which I know you know all about. You start to realize that there is definitely, the government is steering people with music, and so can you talk a little bit about that? I got so many questions about this.
Music and entertainment are the ideal social engineering weapons, because nobody imagines that they're having their worldview shaped for them, and their thoughts and belief systems and their prejudices and the way they view the world shaped and molded for them by, as Edward Bernays said in his book Propaganda, published almost 100 years ago, 1928. He said, "We are governed, our tastes molded and shaped," or words to that effect, "largely by men we've never heard of." And that's the point. We've got social engineers, behavioral scientists, psychologists, anthropologists who are shaping the way so many of us view the world. Well, those who aren't paying attention, that is. And it's done under the radar, and it's achieved ingeniously through entertainment, and particularly music, because everybody loves some kind of music.
Right.
It might be rock music, you might be into dance music or hip hop, you might be into country, you might be into opera, classical, whatever it is. They've got all bases covered. Through my work, and with many other researchers out there doing similar, I've demonstrated how every single genre has been infiltrated to some degree and is pushing agendas. It's steering people off in certain desired directions. I've not done any research actually into opera, because opera isn't really my thing, but I'm sure there are themes. Yeah, there's going to be themes in many of these famous operas that are going to be contributing towards getting people to think a certain way and feel a certain way about different scenarios in the world. And I've not done much on classical music either, but pretty much every other form of music, whether it's rap or urban or dance music or rock or indie, whatever it may be, the signs are there, the telltale signs of the hidden hand of these secret society networks and these mystery school organizations who, as you mentioned earlier in the show, are dark occultists at their core. And they're using the practices and the rituals that they've perfected and their comprehension of the way the human psyche works to their own benefit. It's being achieved through music because people's guard is down when it comes to music. People think that when they go out to see one of their favorite bands perform, or when they go to a club and listen to some dance music, or when they put on the radio, or when they get home after a long, hard day at work and put on a favorite album, they're relaxing. They're going into leisurely mode. And this is the point. Because people are relaxed, they're off their guard, and their subliminal minds are actually so much more susceptible to programming. That's why TV is so effective, because the flicker rates on televisions, coming out of televisions, is compatible with alpha brainwaves, which is basically putting people into a hypnotic trance. You're one shade away from being fully hypnotized. That's why TV advertising works so well, because it's targeting aspects of the subconscious mind without the target being consciously aware of it. And so the same techniques are used in the music industry, and songs and carefully chosen artists and bands are used to push agendas and get people thinking a certain way. And once again, if you suggested to the average music listener that this is going on, they would tell you to put the crack pipe down and get out of here, because they just wouldn't believe you.
Right.
But when you actually do the research and when you actually study the methods that are used, it becomes obvious that this is the case. And this has been my core work for the past 12 years now.
Right.
Exposing how the music industry works, what it's really there for. It's not about harmless fun and entertainment. I only wish it were. I used to think it was. It's there for far more nefarious and dastardly means.
Absolutely. And then when I started learning about it too, you kind of look at music in a whole different light. Like I'm just like, I'm when I was growing up, Mark, I heard about the backward messages on albums. If you played it backwards, you would hear messages and stuff like that. I've heard of that. But then when you really after I started learning about it through your work and other researchers, you start to look at, like I said, the part of that really got me was back in the hippie culture, the 60s, and that you start to see that a lot of these bands that came out, there's government officials behind them. Like somewhere along, you're going to find there's somebody in the family that's in the military, or they're, and it's not, and it just really shocked me when I started realizing that. And the Laurel Canyon, how so many artists were coming out of there, and I'm like, it just can't be coincidence that this is going on. Like they're definitely. So my question kind of you to Mark is, I got so many questions, so I'm going to try to narrow them down. Are bands allowed, like, if you see a big star that's out there, they like a lot, you'll see these big artists pushed, and they're big stars, and they're for years and years. Do you only get that famous if you're behind their agenda, or can the average musician who's not aware of this get further, famous that way, or do you have to be part of their agenda? Is what I'm kind of asking.
You definitely have to be a part of their agenda, and you have to be pushing the messages that they want pushed through your music and through what I call extracurricular activities, which is where you get famous people, whether it be musicians or Hollywood actors, whatever it is, getting behind causes and getting behind movements which are outside of their normal realm. So a great example I always give is Bono, who first and foremost is supposed to be a singer with the rock group U2, but for many, many years now has been propping up various so-called globalist agendas, and he's been allying himself with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, United Nations, all these different operations. He's got his One Foundation, this NGO that he founded. He's a great example. There's many other musicians doing the same thing. will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas has allied himself with the World Economic Forum, amazingly, and he's been named their ambassador for artificial intelligence. So will.i.am, or Shill.i.am as I call him, has been going to Davos in Switzerland and hanging out with Klaus Schwab and all these WEF high rollers and pushing their agendas. So that's the kind of thing that they expect of you. You're not just a rock singer, you're not just a rapper or a producer or whatever it is. That's your public cover. That gets you known to the general public so that they're aware of you. You've gained some familiarity with them. People will have decided they like you. So then when they lead you off down the garden path with some agenda or other, people are far more likely to listen to what they have to say through what they've done in their core work. We've seen this the last 2.5 years, the amount of celebrities that have got behind the official COVID narrative.
I was going to ask you about that, right? Yep.
Yeah. And it's almost 100% of them. There's very, very few exceptions, just a small handful of names that have had anything to say other than the official narrative. But when it comes to the arm spear, agenda, the 3-dart finish, they've all been getting behind it. And it's just the same message that you hear reinforced over and over again. So, you've got various hip hop artists that would have been enticing people to listen to that music to go out and get the arm spear and do what the government tells you, put your mask on, all of this, stay at home, shut down your business. You got Dolly Parton recruited for the country and Western music crowd, telling them to do the same thing. You've got dance music artists, DJs like Carl Cox, addressing the electronic dance music scene, so they've got all bases covered. And there are two basic ways that you can become famous in the music industry. That's what it all boils down to. One is if you're born into one of these important generational bloodline families where you're promised a career in one of these industries. So the fame, the fortune, the wealth, the influence is guaranteed because of the ancestry and the genealogy that you display.
Right.
And for anyone unfortunate enough to be born into one of these families, there isn't really any way out of it. Or if there is, it's not going to end happily. So many of them are just forced into this kind of career. I'm putting together a presentation at the moment for a talk I'm doing at the weekend here in the UK, in Newcastle, and it's called Dark Occult Aspects of Madonna. And she stands as a good example of what it's like to be born into one of these families. So I'm going into her ancestry, which I've discussed in my books and I've talked about it in other videos. Mm-hmm. She, on her mother's side, coming through French-Canadian ancestry, is linked to so many other famous people. So I've got the family tree, and professional genealogists have drawn this up. So Madonna is a cousin of Ellen DeGeneres, Lady Gaga, and Celine Dion, for starters. She's also linked to Justin Trudeau, Hillary Clinton, George W. Bush, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, Tom Hanks, and so many other celebrities. They all emanate from the same bloodlines. She also shares genealogy with Camilla, King Charles's wife.
Right.
And they're all related. So it becomes obvious why Madonna became such a massive star and why she's been pushing agendas for over 4 decades now is because of the family that she was born into. And there are so many other examples of this. Dave McGowan, in his book on Laurel Canyon, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, went into these families that so many of these famous musicians in the counterculture years of the 1960s were born into. And there are endless links to the world of the military and different expressions of military intelligence. That's what Dave's work was all about. So the most famous example is Jim Morrison of the Doors, of course, whose father, Admiral George Stephen Morrison, was the Navy admiral in charge of the fleet of ships involved in the Gulf of Tonkin non-incident false flag, which catapulted America into the Vietnam War. But that's far from an isolated example. Many, many others. John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas. You got Frank Zappa, whose father worked at the Edgewood Arsenal. On biological warfare methods. That's where they cooked up Agent Orange and stuff like that. You've got examples coming out of Canada. There's Joni Mitchell, whose father was in the Canadian Air Force. There's Neil Young. His father was connected to the military. And all these musicians, whether it's from Canada, there's examples from the UK, and there's examples from all over the United States, all descended upon Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills in LA in those formative years in the mid to late 1960s. And they came to shape and mold the counterculture, hippie, flower power, psychedelic rock scene and folk rock and country rock and things like this. But we can now know through the benefit of Dave McGowan's excellent research why these musicians became famous, why it was them over and above any other contenders. It's because of the families they were born into, because these social engineering operations are military grade and they're actually run by aspects of the military and in conjunction with them. So that's why we find the fingerprints of the military intel operations everywhere. And closely linked with that, we also find mind control, trauma-based mind control programming everywhere. We also find dark occult ritualistic practices, Satanism, and we unfortunately find pedophilia and child sex trafficking everywhere as well. So that's one way that musicians get into the game, through the bloodline families that they're born into. The only other way in is the more organic route, where you do start off with some skill and some talent on your own terms, and you do make it a certain amount of the way under your own steam. Right. And it's at this point where the industry has spotters, A&R representatives, if you like, whose job it is to keep an eye out for artists, musicians, bands that they think could serve the control system's agenda. And at this point where they've decided that you're of interest to them, they will come to you and make you an offer. And the best thing any band, any musician can do when that offer comes is turn in the opposite direction and get the hell out of there as quickly as you can. Because once you sign on the dotted line, once you commit to that contract, they've got you. There's no way out from that point forward. You're doing what they tell you now. Yes, you'll have the fame and the fortune and the wealth. You get the mansions, you get the yachts, you get the girls, you get the cocaine and all of this, but you're paying a very heavy price for it, as so many musicians have found through the decades. I bet you there are so many famous household names in the music business that would trade places with you or I in a heartbeat. They would love to go back to an ordinary kind of life where they're free to move about and do whatever they want, live their lives the way they see fit, because they can't do that anymore. They have handlers, they have controllers, they have those higher up in the pecking order, the hierarchy, that are instructing their every move, and it can never be worth it. So that's the way that these assets get chosen.
And now that we're talking about how you said that if you sign on the dotted line, the first thing I thought of, Mark, was the movie American Satan, and I'm sure you've heard of it. And
I have seen that one, yeah.
Right, and to me, I know a lot of people look at it and they don't see it the way that we do, but I saw, like, to me, it was like they're telling people exactly, they kind of put the devil spin on it, and they have to kind of do their Hollywood thing. But when you look at it for underneath that little thin layer and you see what they're actually showing you, they're showing you exactly what goes on with celebrities, with musicians and actors. That there is a point where that decision is made, as you were saying, and you better hope you choose the right way. But I thought that movie depicted it really well. And that movie, I was surprised that it didn't get, it got pretty, at least in my area, it was pretty popular, but I don't think it really got the traction it needed. I don't know if they wanted to bury that movie or what they're, I don't know. But I'm just saying that movie, to me, depicted it perfect, what you're describing.
Yeah. It's a while since I've seen it, but as I recall, it dealt with the idea of ritual sacrifices. Yep. And it was band members nominating a family member or somebody close to them to be a sacrifice in exchange for their engineered success.
Yep.
And this, unfortunately, has been going on in the music industry since the year dot. I detail a lot of this in my books as well. And what I think has been a recent example of that came from the band The Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl, who is an extremely dark character. And when you get into his background, you find that he's got connections through his father into the world of American politics, and actually one of the American presidents. And his father was involved with the office of William Howard Taft, whose father was, or grandfather, I think it was, Alfonso Taft, was the founding member of the Skull and Bones Secret Society at Yale University. So there's a direct link there going back to Dave Grohl. And so it becomes obvious how he got his fame. He started out in the band Nirvana in the Kurt Cobain years as the drummer with that band. And then after Kurt Cobain was, in my opinion, murdered, then Grohl went on to form the Foo Fighters. And he seems to have an obsession with the number 666, which crops up endlessly in my research. It's connected with Satanism. It's connected with the book of the Revelation in the Bible, of course, and it's a favored number by dark occultists everywhere. So Dave Grohl has encoded this into so much of his work. Even when you look at the naming of his band that he created, the Foo Fighters, it equates in gematria to 666, because F is the sixth letter of the alphabet and O is the 15th. 1 and 5 is 6. So Foo equals 666. I've got an entertaining story that I feature in my talks where Dave Grohl went out to a restaurant meal and the bill came to $333. Must have been a hell of a meal. And generous fella that he is, he decided to leave a $333 tip and rounded the bill up to $666. What else could it be? But also, a few months ago, there was this movie titled Studio 666. And it was, on the face of it, a light-hearted sort of horror movie romp. And it featured Dave Grohl and his band going to this haunted mansion and locking themselves up there to record an album. But what happens is the negative energy of the house infects the band members, and particularly Grohl. It takes them over and they become possessed by these demonic entities, and they all end up dying. I've not seen it myself, but I've seen clips of it and people have told me what happens. And there's one scene where Taylor Hawkins, who was the drummer in the Foo Fighters, is seen getting decapitated by a cymbal. I think there could be some wordplay going on there, because you've got symbol as in the musical instrument, but you've also got symbol as in signs and symbols and sigils, which crop up in dark occultism and Satanism everywhere.
Absolutely.
So a very short while after this movie was released, depicting the death of Taylor Hawkins, we get the real death of Taylor Hawkins reported when he turns up dead unexpectedly. And so many researchers feel that this may be some form of ritual sacrifice on the part of Dave Grohl to ensure the continued success of him and his band. And like I say, this is very far from an isolated incident. In my book, Musical Truth Volume 1, I've detailed so many of the music makers, and many of them come from the rap and hip hop world, right, who have lost close family members in some tragedy or other. So it's often their mums turn up dead. Like Kanye West, his mother, who he was very close to, Donda, died on a surgeon's table when she went in for some cosmetic surgery, and it supposedly went wrong. And you've got Bruno Mars, his mum died suddenly, unexpectedly. You've got other family members of particular artists, like Rihanna has lost several family members. Dr. Dre has lost family members. And there's just so many examples of it, like I say. And the idea here is that when you reach a certain level, if you want your fame and your success to continue, part of that heavy price that you have to pay is nominating somebody close to you to be taken out, to be ritually sacrificed. And, it's a very unfortunate and very dark aspect of the entertainment industries. If it was one or two incidents, you could write it off as just one of those unfortunate things. But it's very far from that. There's a very obvious trend, a very obvious pattern, which has been in place for decades. And many researchers have picked up on this.
For sure. And that's really alarming when the way you describe that. Wow. And my question kind of folds into that too, is you see artists too that sometimes, like, I think of Jim Morrison, obviously, because I was a Doors fan, so I think of Jim Morrison. I think of, as you mentioned, Kurt Cobain, and you have these supposed suicides or unexplained deaths because. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that these are, like, I always wonder, like, were they kind of waking up to what was going on? Were they kind of rebelling against what they were a part of, and then they're made an example of? Because I'm sure that must go on, that if you don't go along with, once you sign your name to the line and you don't go along with their agenda, they will make an example out of you. That's what leads me to believe.
You have to look at each artist's case in isolation and study the facts, because it's a real minefield, this type of research, I tell you. You fall down about 500 different rabbit holes at once. And whenever you think you've got a handle on a situation and you're starting to piece it all together, someone or something will come along which completely contradicts everything that you thought you'd found up to that point. A case in point would be the idea that the original Paul McCartney died in 1966. Yep. This is a very popular, very enduring conspiracy theory coming out of the music industry. The idea being that the Paul McCartney we have today is not the original guy. The original guy died in some sort of accident, which many people feel was a ritual sacrifice, and he was replaced by a guy going by the name of Billy Shears. Right. So we got the clue to it on the Sgt. Pepper album, where they introduced the character Billy Shears, known as William Shepard. So for a long time, I thought that one was all clear cut and I'd got a handle on it. But then all sorts of other information started coming my way, and evidence and forensic information. And I had to reassess my whole take on that situation. So now I've thrown out a lot of what I previously believed in that case and reassessed things. I certainly maintain that there's been more than one Paul McCartney put out there publicly over the decades. But does that mean the guy that we have today is an imposter and not the original Paul? Not necessarily, and I don't know. because there's so much contradictory information, like I say. So it's a very difficult subject area to get your head around, and it's very dangerous, I think, to make definitive statements and blanket statements. Like,
sure.
whenever you hear of an artist dying, a very famous musician, the death will in some way be faked. And what's actually happened is that they've been retired off into some sort of CIA witness protection program type scenario, given a new identity and allowed to live out their remaining years. I certainly feel that does go on in some cases. And some artists who I feel would have been subject to that include the aforementioned Jim Morrison. I don't accept that Jim Morrison died at the age of 27, right, on the 3rd of July 1971 in his bathtub in Paris. There's a lot of death by bathtub around. Don't know if you've noticed.
I have.
Aaron Carter. Yeah, Aaron Carter is the latest one. He's turned up dead in a bathtub. Whitney Houston turned up dead in a bathtub. Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries. There's been many through the ages. So I feel that Jim Morrison didn't die when we're told he did. I also feel that about Elvis Presley.
I was going to just ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't accept that Elvis died in his bathroom, in August 1977 at the age of 42, because there's evidence to show that Elvis was connected into the intelligence services and was working for them. So he'd be just the kind of candidate to be retired off early. But then there are other artists who I personally feel were taken out, and they would include John Lennon, Bob Marley, Chester Bennington, Chris Cornell. It's pretty obvious they took out Whitney Houston.
Yep.
Some people feel that Michael Jackson and Prince's deaths were faked.
I was going to ask
possible.
You that. Right.
Right. It's possible, but my instinct is leaning towards both of them having been taken out. Same with George Michael, because what you get with Michael Jackson, Prince, and George Michael is three artists who did become outspoken and did go off script.
Right.
So they all entered into legal situations with their respective record labels, which in the case of Michael Jackson and George Michael was Sony, the Sony Corporation, and with Prince it was Warner Brothers. And they had a thing or two to say about the unfair conditions in which record labels keep their key artists. Not the kind of thing that would ingratiate them to their record labels. And you can imagine that it would have pissed off one or two people sort of in the hierarchy and the pyramid of power. So it's not hard to see. It's not hard to see why they would have become candidates for being taken out. So I think that was the case with them. But you have to look at each instance in isolation and examine what evidence there is for them actually dying when we're told they did. David Bowie, I'm kind of on the fence with. I think it's quite possible David Bowie was retired off. He might still be out there somewhere.
Wow, really interesting. I'm glad that you brought up Michael Jackson and Elvis, because I was going to ask you about that's another one I was looking into. And when I saw Michael, when he was starting to really speak out against Sony, even then I was like, boy, he's going to be in trouble for this. Like, he's going way off script.
Well, I think they sent those two legal cases his way.
Right.
I personally feel as warnings, because he was starting to go off script. I think what was actually happening is that Michael was starting to break through his mind control programming, which he'd had since early childhood. This is the way they get so many of them on script and pushing their agendas.
They're so young. Some of them are so young.
They get them from early childhood. So Britney Spears, is a great example. Miley Cyrus, and Michael Jackson, who was inducted into the industry at the hands of his father, who basically sold him as a slave to the record business. And there's so much evidence in the form of symbolism in so many cases to show that Michael was mind controlled from a very early age.
Agreed.
This is the way satanic ritual abuse occurs. They start it from around about the age of 4 or 5, or earlier in some cases, when the mind and the consciousness of the individual is still being formed. And it's so easy to put them into a hypnagogic trance, which is where so much of the programming gets done in those conditions. Right. So Michael would have been exposed to all of that from early childhood. And when they subject them to these horrific traumas and they cause the mind to dissociate from reality, that's when they can be programmed with amazing talents So it's something that people said about Michael Jackson. He's the most amazing dancer,
Right.
the most amazing entertainer, showman. Yeah, well, all of those skills and talents were programmed into him as part of what he went through, because they wanted him to be a great entertainer so that he could stay on script, push agendas, and generate shitloads of money
Yep.
for everyone involved in his career. But what I think started to happen in adulthood was that Michael's lifelong mind control programming was starting to break down. And he was starting to regain some of his innate humanity and his own consciousness. And he was looking around at what was going on with his record label and with the industry generally and in the world at large. And he had a thing or two to say about it. So he started to become outspoken. And I think they sent those two situations involving accusations of him being involved with pedophilia, child sex abuse, his way, as little warning shots, as a way of them saying, yeah, remember who we are. Here's a little reminder of what we can do to you if you don't start playing ball. So they had to do it a second time because the message evidently hadn't got through. And I think towards the end, it was decided that he'd become too much of a liability, too much of a loose cannon, and he was no longer an asset. And it was not in their interests to keep him around. And so we know the rest.
Wow, yeah. And I imagine people, Mark, hearing this, they're going to have, this is, probably going to make people really uncomfortable, this interview that we're doing, because,
Well, it's triggering.
It's triggering. It really is. And especially if you're a big music fan, which a lot of people are, when you start to think about, like now, I don't listen to music the same way. I just can't. And so I think a great way to kind of wrap it up, because I know we're getting close to our time. Another part that I want to touch on with you is the symbology that is in the music, like with live concerts and on album covers. That's another, like through your work and some other people I've been watching, is definitely when you see it, then you can't unsee it. And I off the top of my head, I think of people like Madonna and Lady Gaga and Marilyn Manson, and I mean the list can go on, but the imagery that they have on their albums and on their live performances is really startling. They're throwing it right in people's faces. And I've talked to people about this in my, like friends and stuff, and you'll see all the images of celebrities. They're doing their one eye through the triangle, and they're doing these hand gestures, their devil horns, and all of this. And a lot of the people I talk to say, oh, they're just doing this because it's going to give them attention, because they're doing that symbol with the one eye and stuff like that. So everybody's doing it, and it gives them the attention, and it's going to make people talk about them. And I try to explain to them that it's not like that. Like maybe if it was one or two celebrities doing that, it'd be different, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures of celebrities doing these hand gestures, and then the symbology in their concerts, their albums. Like this is a language that they're speaking, correct?
That's right. So much of the programming gets done through signs, symbols, sigils, because they all carry resonant frequencies, energy, and it makes a connection with people on a subconscious level. And it can generate certain mind states, make people feel a certain way, again, shape and mold their worldviews and their belief systems. And it's done very subtly and very sneakily in the form of symbolism. Right. And they also act as little calling cards of these controllers of the industry. They like putting them out there. There's an element of morbid satanic mockery to what they do, because they see the rest of us as profane, as ignorant, as useless eaters, the masses, and they like to kind of tease us. It's like a cat playing with a mouse that it's caught, it just likes playing those games. And that's what we're getting done to us. But I tell you, the old tricks aren't working the way they used to, because so many people are getting wise to this stuff now. And one way that I feel I've been very successful in pulling people into the whole realm of truth discovery, truth discernment, critical thinking, is by triggering their curiosity through talking about the music industry. Because like I said earlier, everyone likes some kind of music. And if you can demonstrate to somebody that a favorite artist of theirs, some kind of famous band or some kind of famous artist they've looked up to, is in some way engulfed in mind control programming or Satanism, or unfortunately in some cases pedophilia, that's something that very few people are going to be able to turn away from and forget all about. Once you've sparked somebody's curiosity with a statement of that nature and with some evidence of that nature, they're not going to forget about it. And in 99% of cases, they're going to want to know more. Right. And this has been my personal experience. If I can engage somebody in a conversation about, maybe if it's an older person, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or the Who or Jimi Hendrix, somebody from the 1960s, or if it's a younger person talking about Rihanna or Beyonce or Cardi B or Ed Sheeran, whoever it is, most people are going to want to know more once you've piqued their interest like that.
I know I did.
And right. And if you can demonstrate that it doesn't just stop at the music industry. So it's not that we live in a world that is basically fine and just and ruled by truth and freedom, and the music industry is just a bad apple. It's just, somehow it's slipped under the radar and it's doing all these things like pushing Satanism and all these dark occult practices. But the rest of society is fine. You don't get that in politics or Hollywood movies and stuff. No, let's be realistic about it. Let's be grown up. Let's be mature.
Right.
If an industry can be shown to be as corrupt and as dark as the music industry truly is, and I've put out 3 highly comprehensive books about this. I've been lecturing about it for over 10 years. I've done, I don't even know how many hundreds of radio shows and podcasts. I don't know what more I can do to help reinforce that point, that the music industry is not what you thought it was. So if it can be shown that this industry is that broken, then it follows that every other aspect of society has to be the same way. Organized society generally, this world in which we find ourselves, is steeped in the same degraded, debased values.
Agreed.
And, corrupted states of consciousness, because there's no way this industry could flourish otherwise. So it follows that the world of politics must be rotten to the core. And of course it is. Yeah. The world of big business must be rotten to the core. The world of big pharma, so-called medicine, the world of the military, the world of science, of academia, the mainstream media, the so-called news. Every other aspect of our lives can be shown to be sickeningly degraded in the same way. Absolutely. So by getting people's curiosity with the music industry stuff, I've found it's a great way of trading them up to higher truths. And then when you gain an acceptance of the real world, nuts and bolts 3D reality of the way it all functions, you then have to go up another level into spiritual and metaphysical realms and ask yourself, what is this reality in the first place? What is this world? Who are we? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of these lives? And by this point, you're getting into real high-minded truths, right. Stuff that really matters, stuff that really makes sense and gives a purpose to these human lives if we're engaging our minds in conversations of that nature. So that's why I feel the music industry stuff is a great way of getting people to make some sense of their lives, if you want to express it like that. So much more so than other aspects of what's going on.
I agree. I think it's a great doorway in, because I think you really nailed it there, Mark, because everybody loves some type of music. And then if they're not a music fan, I have run across a few people that aren't really big into music, but they're definitely into movies. So then you can look at it from there. Like you said, it'll branch into that. And then if not, and you said, it's kind of like they're hitting us on all fronts. So I'm glad that you kind of brought it back to that it's not just the music or the movie industry. We're getting it from government, entertainment, pharma, you name it. They're hitting us from all aspects. And I think the key is to become aware of what is going on, which is what you are helping people understand. I think that's the key, is to waking people up, is to find a way in to at least get their curiosity going. I think that's key, and you've done that with music and the work that you're doing, which I thank you for. I think it's amazing, and it's definitely, when I started looking into the music industry, it was shocking because I was a big fan, and then I started looking into even the lyrics. I don't think a lot of people pay attention to lyrics, but one thing I always did, and I was a big 80s, I'm stuck in the 80s. I love the 80s heavy metal. Everybody knows that watches me. And bands like Megadeth and stuff like that, Metallica, and you start reading the lyrics that they're doing. And then I started even looking at the music, the lyrics for rap music and stuff, and you can definitely, they're really, it's, I just have to keep saying, they really flaunt it. Like, they really are putting it out there. I just don't think, as you said, people are paying attention and as much as they should be. But in a lot of the bands I listen to, it's in the lyrics. Like, they're telling you what is happening or what is going to happen. It's really eerie. I think of Megadeth, that's a band I've listened to, and Dave Mustaine claims to be Christian now and born again, and was into the dark occult for a while, into witchcraft and stuff, but he kind of talks about what we're talking about in a little bit lesser of a scale, not as deep as we just went into, but his lyrics say it all, and he's been kind of writing about this since, at least I can remember, from the 80s. It's really, people need to start paying attention, I think, to the wording of what they're using. It's really eye-opening.
Right. And it's shocking what you find. So I was always more into rap and hip hop and R&B, so-called urban music. And I played a lot of that in the 90s on my radio shows and in the clubs. And at the time, the programming just completely went over my head because I wasn't engaged in the level of consciousness that I am now. I hadn't researched any of this stuff. And every now and again, I go back and listen to some of these old records, or I listen to a tape of an old radio show from the 90s. And the programming is so blatant to me now. I can see that with rap music, they were steering it off in the direction of violence and criminal lifestyles, but also materialism. And with so many of the records that I played, they were glorifying champagne and gold chains and, you know, getting swaggy up in the club with a shiny suit on and all this absolute nonsense, just an embracing of material lifestyles and the pushing of brands and stuff. And with R&B, there were so many records by female artists that were just bashing men.
Absolutely.
Like my man's useless, you know, no scrubs, TLC, Destiny's Child, bills, bills, bills. What can you do for me? Can you pay my bills? If not, get out of here. You know, it was like the only thing men are good for is paying bills. Other than that, they're useless. They're scrubs. They're players. And that programming was going on. And I realize now that was social engineering agendas, but I didn't not know what those were at the time. So if you're not engaging your conscious mind and you've not studied this stuff, you're going to be getting programmed. So it becomes so important to break the programming. And unfortunately, it does take something away from the enjoyment, I've found. Because you listen back to these artists or these songs that you used to love, and now you can hear so obviously how it was just programming, conditioning the listeners in some way or other. And it takes something away from the enjoyment, unfortunately. You can still enjoy the songs, and I've never told people that they should throw out all their old albums or stop listening to a favorite band. But just on a personal level, where that music used to connect with you in a deep, profound way, I find that something is taken away from it. So you have to let that go, unfortunately, because that's truth. That's living a fulfilled life. That's aligning yourself with right action. And you have to find other ways of filling that vacuum in your life, because who wants to be mind control programmed when you know this stuff is going on, right?
Right. And once you see it, you can unsee it. That's the thing I learned too, very quickly. And just to kind of build on what you were saying, I think back to the 80s. As I said, I was big into that genre of music, and they were just pumping sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was all it was. It was all about girls, how many times you can get laid, how much drugs you can do, how much drinking you can do. And it was just, and then I from the 80s, I slipped into the grunge era, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but that was definitely the depression brought everybody down from that party state into the depression. And you got, it was crazy. And then
heroin and suicide.
And suicide. Yeah. And it's just like, wow, they really are steering society. And I think people are waking up to this. I hope they are. Because it's really obvious to me. Like, you can see how they're kind of steering people. And
well, I think they are, mate, because every now and again I glance at a Facebook thread from a so-called normie, what might be referred to as a normie. So not someone that's engaged themselves in truthful research, but they'll be discussing things like occult symbolism in music videos and stuff, and they'll say, oh, did you see that pyramid, and why is 666 everywhere, and why they're doing the Baphomet hand sign and stuff. So I think that awareness is getting out there. People realize that the industry is being used for these purposes, and hopefully that's starting to spark some questions in their minds, and it's hopefully causing them to go off and do some research of their own, because there's no shortage of this information out there now. You know, it's all right there at anyone's disposal on the internet.
Right.
if they have the will to go and discover all this stuff. And it's a slow drip thing. It's, it's taking a while, but things are headed in the right direction, I feel, in terms of the old tricks just not working anymore.
I agree. I think a lot of people. I'm kind of like you, and I'll kind of poke around and see what people are saying, and especially with Super Bowl shows and stuff, you'll really hear people kind of talking about like, wow, there's a lot of symbology in that, who was ever performing. They're just like, it was everywhere, and so people are definitely. I agree with you, Mark, that people are definitely starting to see through the shattering the illusion. It's a great way to put it. And,
About bloody time, right?
it's about time. I agree. So, and I'm just looking. I know that we're almost out of time. I don't want to. I know you're so busy. And thank you once again, Mark. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I was looking forward to this interview for the last couple months. I really was, and I'm glad that we got the time zone thing figured out, and we can make this happen for everyone.
Sure.
Just to wrap it up, I want to give you the floor. Can you if there's anything you want to tell people about what you got coming up, anything that you're doing right now that you would like to let people know where they can find all of your work? I want to give you the floor for the last couple minutes just to let everybody know what's going on and where they can find all your great information.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Well, I've put out 3 books in my Musical Truth series. So Volume 1 came out in early 2016. Volume 2 was 2018. Volume 3 was at the end of 2021. And these all document my findings into the true nature of the music industry and what it's really used for across 3 volumes. They're very comprehensive books. That's how long it took to tell that story. So they're all available on Amazon, which is the Antichrist to so many people, I know. So it is a convenient way of getting hold of them. But if people want to get signed copies from me direct, I can mail them out from here. You just got to hit me up with an email, and the email address is markdevlinuk@gmail.com. I've also put out an allegorical novel called The Cause and the Cure. I had great fun writing that. I put it out in 2019. And on the surface of it, it's like a murder mystery thriller set in Oxford, the city of Oxford, my place of birth, in the early 90s, 1990, 1991. It's full of period detail from those times. It's got a subplot in the narrative, all to do with the acid house and rave scene, which was burgeoning at the time.
Right.
But once you strip away the surface narrative, it's layered with all kinds of symbolism, allegory, metaphors. So I've used the story to get across natural law teachings and spiritual principles and this kind of thing. I had a great time writing that book, and the next one that I put out is going to be the sequel to it. So this one is going to be called The Gift and the Curse, named after a Jay-Z album, and I'm looking to get that out in 2023. Very excited to be starting the writing of that soon. So I've got an audiobook version of Musical Truth Volume 1, which I've narrated. I've got an audiobook of The Cause and the Cure. I'm currently working on the audiobook of Musical Truth 3, which I want to get out at the turn of the year. So that's my major project at the moment. I'm doing a whole bunch of talks all over the UK, and I frequently put out videos and podcasts, and you can get links to all of those from my main website, which is djmarkdevlin.com.
Perfect. And I'll make sure I'm going to make sure that I leave the links for Al where you can like that web for your website, Mark, for the One Great Work Network, your YouTube channel. I will make sure there's links everywhere so people can find your amazing information that you're putting out there. And I just want to once again, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with me. It was a real pleasure having you on here, and you're always welcome back, my friend.
No worries, brother. I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate what you're doing, your contribution to what needs to take place in this world. We all have our individual contributions that we can make, and we all do what we can, whether that's putting out podcasts, whether it's doing books and talks and stuff. But for people that don't do that, on the ground activism, just getting out there, spreading awareness on a one-to-one sort of personal level, getting involved in projects and campaigns and anything that just highlights the evil and the darkness and the corruption in this world and seeks to replace it with truth and freedom and justice. Lots of people doing that in lots of different ways. So I applaud everyone that's engaged in the fight. As long as you're doing something, everyone needs to be doing something.
Right.
It's not enough just to sit back and listen to these shows. It's not enough for these podcasts to form entertainment. Everyone needs to be contributing in some way. So I applaud everyone who already is. And for anyone who's not, find a way of getting involved. There's
Yep.
something everyone can do.
That's what I tell everyone too. Maybe podcasting's not your thing, but there's always something you're good at. Everybody's good at something. So find what you're good
Start
at.
a meetup group, bring
Yep.
like-minded people together.
Yep.
Just be the catalyst for that. It's all very important.
I agree. So I agree, Mark, 100%. Thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, like I said, you're welcome back anytime, and I'll make sure I stay in touch with you. So take care, and you're doing amazing stuff. Thank you so much, Mark, for all the work you're doing and the information you're getting out to everyone.
All right. Thanks, mate.
All
All
right,
the best.
take care, my
Cheers.
friend. Have a great
Thank you.
day.
All right.
All right, take care. Well, there you have it, my friends. That was so amazing. What a great interview. Wow, what a pleasure to have Mark on the show here. I was so excited, as I was saying earlier, for this interview with Mark. I love his work and the information that he puts out there. He was one of the people that was very key to me opening my eyes to the what's going on in the music industry. I was kind of seeing it, as I was saying during our interview, I was kind of seeing what was going on, and I kind of had an idea, because I've kind of looked into it, and especially because I was a Doors fan with Jim Morrison. And then when I started to find out that his dad was a, high-ranking admiral in the Navy, and you start looking into all the bands that were coming out of Laurel Canyon, and I started looking down that path, and then as I looked into Elvis, and so I was definitely aware of it. But Mark really brings it all together in his, his presentations, his, the information he's putting out, his books, and you really do start to see that there's a lot of dark shit going on in our world in general, like we were saying, in every aspect. These satanic, social engineers, these dark psychologists, as I like to call them, dark psychologists, these master psychologists that are attacking us on all fronts, are really inverting everything. And, the music is a great way because, as Mark said, everybody likes some form of music, or most people. So if you can get them to see what's going on in the music industry, and then you can start to guide them, and they will start to see that this is just one aspect and they're hitting us from all fronts. So, wow, what an amazing interview, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. And I hope to have Mark on again in the future. He's so busy. He really is a busy guy. So I'm just really, it's just amazing that he took the time to come and speak with me and to all of you guys. So thank you guys for, once again, coming and joining me and supporting me, which I can't thank you guys enough for everyone who is out there supporting me. And just to let you guys know, that I'm still doing my Revolution Radio show. I do 3 shows a week. Now I'm doing 3. So on Friday nights, I'm kind of doing a music show in the Hawk's Nest, and that usually starts around 8:30. So if you just go to freedomslips.com and you can go down to the players, you'll see player A, and then you'll see Hawk's Nest, and then player B. So on Friday nights, Eastern Standard Time, like I said, between 8 and 8:30, around there, I usually go on for a couple hours and just do a music show. Then you can also join me Saturday. I do have a new show with my co-host Jonathan Wright, who has nothing new under the sun. I've interviewed him for this channel. Great co-host. We're doing amazing shows. That is Saturday nights, and that is from 6 till 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're in Studio B. So please, guys, come and check it out. We have a lot of great guests lined up for the next couple months. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys there. And then, of course, I do have my Monday night show, which I've been doing for almost a year now. And that is Monday nights, 6 to 8 p.m. as well, Eastern Standard Time, and I'm in Studio A. And I'll leave links so you can go check it out. As I said, it's freedomslips.com. And I hope to see you guys, not see you, but I hope you guys tune in and check out all the great interviews that I have coming up on both shows. Like Jonathan and I got some great, amazing guests lined up for our Saturday show, and I've also got a lot of great guests for the next couple of months lined up for the Monday show. So it's going to be exciting. A lot of great information is going to be going out there. And a new thing is you can also find my interviews on the One Great Work Network, which I will leave links to. I'm so honored that I got invited to join the network. And so I've been slowly getting videos uploaded there, and started to upload all my videos to Rumble. And then after that, I'm going to be uploading all my stuff to Odyssey. So I'm getting out there slowly and getting all of my content out there. It's taking a little bit of time to do it, but I'm getting it done. So thank you guys so much for, like I said, taking the time to come and watch this. It feels great to be doing a video interview once again, and I got a lot of great interviews lined up for the future. So please keep checking back often, and I'll make sure I leave links in the description, as I said, for Mark's website and all the places you can find his great information. Please check it out. You will not be sorry, and you're going to really get an education on especially what's going on in the music industry. So please check out those links, and I'll also leave links for, like I said, for Revolution Radio and all of those good things. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and keep looking forward to some more great interviews coming your way. And I hope you guys have a great day, great evening, wherever it is where you are, and stay safe. And remember, guys, we are in a spiritual war here, and we have to start all doing our part. So whatever way you can, get out there and start educating people on what's going on in this world and about truth and all the things that we talk about, because right now we are in a fight. And I mean, we're at that tipping point where I keep saying it can definitely go either way. So, I mean, whatever, as Mark said, whatever way you can. Everybody's got a talent that they're good at. Find a way to, incorporate that talent and start doing the great work and getting the information out there, because it's more important now than it ever has been. So, just wanted to end with that, guys. So, thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you guys soon.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.